Um, this is the first part of chapter 6 for Ed Psych. And chapter 6 is on cognitivism. So the last couple of chapters on behaviorism. So we're doing a little switch here. Cognitivism is concerned about how people learn. And so, because people learn differently. Some people are better morning, some at night, some are auditory, some are visual. Um, so cognitivism is not all learners are created equal. Like in behaviorism, everybody's the same, like democracy. But in cognitivism, some people are better learners than others. And cognitivism studies how people learn, how they process information, how the information is stored, and most important, how it's retrieved. Um, so we start off with the chapter, A Cognitive Map. Cognitive Map was made by Tolman. He did it with rats, and he had them run a maze. There was with no reinforcement, and then he started a maze with reinforcement, and then he stopped, and he blocked all the quick avenues to the reinforcement, but the rats still found the food, and he decided that they had developed a map in their heads of the maze. And then to make a long story short, we now know humans do that, but doesn't have to be a map. So the new modern definition of a cognitive map is a mental representation in the brain. So if I say giraffe, when you picture what you in your head, that's a cognitive map. And so if you don't have a cognitive map of something, you don't know it because you have to have a mental representation of it. Um, so basically chapter 6 is on memory because that's one big part of cognitive psychology. And there's 3 types of memory. Sensory memory, where only the senses are stimulated. It lasts for a very short time. There's no cognitive map, so it's not remembered, it's not stored. So it's basically like a cocktail party phenomenon, they call it, where you meet a bunch of people and they say their names, and 2 seconds later you don't know who the heck they are because they weren't important to you or whatever. So sensory memory, I don't know why they call it memory because nothing's remembered. But anyway, it is for a brief second. But in order to get from sensory memory to short-term or working memory, you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention. And so we did a couple things in class to show that, not paying attention. It's very hard for people to describe what a penny is, even though they've seen thousands of them, is because they don't pay attention to what they are because it's only a penny. Short-term memory or called working memory is a active, ongoing, conscious process. You have to work at it, hence working memory. It's highly limited, 5 to 9 items, 7 plus or minus 2 or 5 to 9. Of course, some people and college students, you especially, can kind of increase that short-term memory. But it's easily disturbed. I mean, if you're trying to study with the TV on or your CD playing or your roommate talking or whatever the case may be, you're really not maybe paying attention and incorporating this. One of the ways, though, we can increase short-term memory is called chunking. And chunking is putting related items together. It's like George Washington, Martha Washington, Mount Vernon, that's 3. Well, we can say George Washington married to Martha and lived in Mount Vernon, that's 1. So we chunked the information together. So we can chunk related items together, like your phone number. 573, blah, 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 blah. There's 10 numbers, you chunk them all together, and it takes up 1 spot instead of 7. In order to get from short-term to long-term, which teachers like, you have to encode. So sensory to short-term, pay attention. Short-term to long-term, encoding. What is encoding? You have to organize material. You got to put it in a folder, and then you have to save it, like a computer. So, but long-term memory is passive and unconscious. You know, I asked you when's your birthday is, you can tell me. You weren't thinking about it, but you could call that up. So uh, encoding is very important. Then we talked about 5 ways to increase long-term memory. The 5 were: 1, material that is meaningful is remembered longer, so, or better. So if it's important to you, you will learn it. You could go to terrible chemistry class, and today they're talking about an antidote for poisonous mushrooms, and unfortunately you ate one. You're listening in class because it's meaningful. That's why you usually do better in your major than in your gen ed courses, because some of the courses you just don't see the value of it. The second thing is more striking. Things that stand out or remember longer. Fantasies, nightmares. If you went to a party and somebody came with an axe in their head, you would remember that. If you go to another party and you find somebody you really like, you remember them. So things, that's why we underline or highlight. Unfortunately, most of you highlight everything so that nothing stands out. The third is repetition. If we keep repeating it, it is easier learned. That's why you know your name, because you hear it so often. 4 is encoding or organization, how you organize material. If your closet is organized, you can find an outfit immediately. But if you have a giant pile in your room, of course clean, and you go try to find the outfit, it's going to take a lot longer because it's not organized. And finally, visual over verbal. We learn a lot more by seeing it than we do by hearing it. Now, we put both together. That's the best way to do it. But visual is better over verbal. Okay.